In this video, I want to talk about why you shouldn't take the Mcat if you are not ready. A lot of students think that taking the Mcat is the same as the SAT or the ACT, where you just take it a couple of times and you're not really too worried because most schools really only focus on the best score that you get, or they'll super score it. But that's not the case with the Mcat. Actually, every medical school will view your various Mcat scores if you have more than one, which my goal for most students is only to take it one and be done. And that's not always the case, and you could take it again, of course, if you don't do well. But the goal is to shoot for only having to take it one time, not to go in thinking you're going to take it multiple times. And so medical schools will view it differently. Some schools will look at all your different scores. Some schools may heavily favor the most recent score that you took. It really all depends. And also some schools will take a look at, okay, did you have pretty good scores overall in maybe your science sections, but it was just your CARS score that really brought down the overall? Well, then maybe even though the overall score isn't as good, let's say it was a 504, but you really did well in the other three sections, then they might consider that more highly than someone who got a 504 because they got like 125, 126 on basically every section. So it really varies. I can't sit here and give you an answer for exactly how every school is going to look at your Mcat. But what I can say is you shouldn't go into the Mcat when you're not even close to ready to take that exam, because you will inevitably have to take it again. And if that's the case, you're really just wasting time, money, and your own focus and energy. Because if you're not going into that test thinking this is the only shot I have, I promise you, you are not going to be putting in the proper amount of work and dedication, because you think, oh, this is just like my practice run or my warm up and I'll take it again in a couple of months. And I see this all the time. I don't know why this is a misconception amongst the pre-med community. Not everyone thinks this, but I see it a lot, and I always get questions about this. I was just speaking with a student who they're looking at actually signing up for our program, and they had a test date in like a week, and I asked, why are you looking into an MCAT program if your test date is in a week? And they were like, oh, well, I know I'm gonna have to take it again. Well, if you know you're already going to have to take the Mcat again, you probably should not be taking that test date. Now, this is not to say if you're not at your exact target score that you shouldn't take the test. Let's say your target score is a 516, and on your last two practice tests, which I usually say is most accurate if you take the last two AMCs, that's going to give you a good idea of where you're scoring around. And I don't see most students veer off more than 5 or 6 points in either direction from those last two practice tests. Of course, there's outliers, but if you're within range of what your target score is, then you go in and you have a good day. You might hit that target score, you might exceed it, or you might be a couple points below, but you're generally going to be around where your last two AMC practice exams are. And so that's a good gauge of whether or not you're ready to take the exam. And a lot of students might take the exam where they've never even broken 500 and yet they want a 510 plus. Well, if that's the case, you're better off figuring out what's going wrong with your studying, how you can improve it, and delaying your test date. And if that means pushing back to the next application cycle, it's okay. You don't have to rush your application. The goal is to become a doctor. It doesn't mean you have to become a doctor as fast as possible. And honestly, most students who take that approach end up having to reapply anyway. And so then they just wasted time and money. And also, another point, I've never had a student who told me they regretted taking their extra gap year or their gap year. And I know it feels like when you're in the moment, all you want to do is get into medical school already and start the process. But this is such a long journey that you have to be willing to love the journey itself and not just the final destination. I'm about to hopefully match into residency soon, and it's just another step on this journey. Then I'm going to have to go through residency. Then I apply to fellowship. And then even when you're attending, you're going to be looking for a job or building a practice or joining a practice. There's always the next step. And so if you don't take a minute to just stop and be in the moment and really enjoy the actual process, then I think you're going to spend too much of your time and your life always chasing this moving goalpost. And so if you have to take an extra gap year and you do a job that you enjoy and you make some money and you spend some time with friends and family, I promise you it's not the end of the world. And also, if you have to do that so that you can properly study for the Mcat and get a good score and really take it seriously, that is what you should be doing. And so I just wanted to make this video because I see a lot of students make this mistake of taking the Mcat when they're not ready. There's so many retakers every single year, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad to retake the Mcat. Like if you were doing really well on your practice test and so you go in and take the test and you just have a terrible terrible day and you do a lot worse than you know you're capable of, then of course go and retake it. But don't go into the MCAT when you haven't even gotten close to your target score. I'm assuming your target score is within reason, right? Like if your target score is a 528, of course you'll probably never be close to that in your practice. And if you are, then awesome. You should go take the test. But in general, you should give yourself the right amount of time to study for the MCAT. I recommend between 3 and 6 months, depending on the student and how much time you could put in and how you're properly approaching your studying. Some students have no clue how to actually study for the MCAT. So if you want to know how, click the link below. There'll be a free training that shows you exactly how to properly study for the MCAT. And if you are enjoying this content and you're finding it helpful, I'd love it if you'd like and subscribe. We're putting out videos every single week on different pre-med topics to help you get into medical school. All right, I'll see you in the next one.